Welcome to Dish and Nutrition Podcast, where we dish on trending nutrition topics, all the while making it easy and fun to understand. I'm your host, Sarah Williams.
And I am your co-host, Emma Bolin.
Emma, today we were talking about, I think actually you asked me when I talked about this podcast, like creating it, you were like, I want to talk about this. Do you remember what you said?
What is it?
Cortisol.
Slay!
Cortisol, I feel like, is a really trending.
No, it is.
It's a super
everywhere.
trending thing. So I wanted to get on top of it. It's not a good or bad thing.
Yeah.
I think there's
So many. It's like gluten.
the wellness baddies are just harping on it.
No, you're right. I actually, when we talked about this previously, that I went online and I'm like, there's so many different types of videos out there with like so much.
Oh, yeah. All right. So do you know what cortisol is? We're just
Break
gonna
it
hop
down
right
for
into
me,
it.
sister.
Do you know what it is?
Well, I mean, I know cortisol is produced by your adrenal glands,
Slay. Look at you.
but tell us.
Okay.
Give us the breakdown.
What is cortisol? It is a hormone that is produced by the adrenal glands. Great job. It is. So do you know what your fight or flight?
Yeah.
Obviously, I feel like everybody knows what a fight or flight
Yes.
response is. So that's managed by your cortisol hormone.
Okay.
And the main role of cortisol is to regulate our stress response.
Okay.
We're going to get even more into anatomy and physiology. Are
Let's
you
do
ready?
it.
We're going to say some pretty fun words. All right.
Miss Frizzle.
Yeah, Miss Frizzle. All right. So cortisol release is managed by the HPA, and that is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So when our hypothalamus detects that like we're in trouble or you're being chased by a bear, or in my case, just checking out at a grocery store, apparently I'm stressed out.
Getting on Instagram for me.
The pituitary gland secretes adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH, which tells the adrenals to release cortisol.
Okay.
And so your cortisol levels are going to be different throughout the day. Your cortisol levels are going to change throughout the day. And so your levels are going to tend to be higher in the morning, which helps you wake up, start your day, get things going. And in the evening, it's going to get low. So it helps you sleep, helps you relax. And then levels start slowly rising around 2 a.m. Fun fact. I remember when I was pumping my breast milk for my baby, I would have to label the milk, like if I pumped it in the morning or if I pumped it in the evening, because if I gave Harper, say, a 9 a.m. pumped bottle and it was like 9 p.m., theoretically it could have been bad for her because she wouldn't have been able to go to sleep because the cortisol levels are higher. That's very, very like hypothesis.
That's interesting though.
I did have to pay attention to timing.
Yeah. I feel like I'll be laying in bed and I'll get on my phone and then I don't know, see something or read something that like possibly stresses me out. And then I like can't go to bed probably because my do you agree with that? Because my cortisol got raised. If the 1 by 1 book that you gave me, I couldn't read it at night because I was stressed.
Oh yeah.
And like,
because it was a thriller.
Yeah. So does that mean my cortisol was raised?
It doesn't necessarily mean like, I mean, yes,
Because
it could. There's other, like a myriad of other reasons why you would feel anxious regarding it because the book itself was a thriller.
Yeah.
But in turn, your body could have sensed that raised
Like fight or
awareness.
flight. Yeah, interesting.
So yeah, it's person to person, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, reading a thriller before bedtime is not probably going to be the most relaxing. However, I like thrillers and it puts me to sleep. So
Really?
yeah. Okay, and then also cortisol plays a pivotal role in metabolism and immune response. It helps you regulate your circadian rhythm, like I just said, and it helps you form memories. Chronically elevated cortisol levels can actually result in metabolic syndrome, which is like elevated blood pressure, lipids, blood sugars, all elevated. Just a big old mess. Big old mess you don't want.
Yeah, that doesn't sound good. I saw that high cortisol, which I'm sure we're going to get into this if I had to guess. It can like create inflammation and...
Yes, we will get into that. We will get into too high, too low cortisol levels and everything that goes along with that. So my next point is cortisol good or bad? I feel like it is deemed just a bad thing. Would you say like that's the general consensus? They're like, oh, cortisol.
If you're this, then you have high cortisol. Yeah,
exactly.
For sure.
So it's a catch-22 kind of, because like it's important for a lot of bodily functions and you need it for like a homeostasis for your body.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you need pull and give of inflammation and non-inflammation.
Yeah,
so
that makes
like
sense.
it's important for a lot of bodily functions, and we don't want to be afraid of it or eliminate it altogether. You need it, but you don't need too much of it. You know, like it's
in moderation.
Okay, so every one of our cells have a cortisol receptor, which tells us that cortisol's effects are felt throughout the body. So like spikes in cortisol are like really nothing to worry about. Like just throughout the day, you're going to have highs and lows. It's those chronic ones. If you have too chronically low levels, too chronically high levels,
like
which
if it
is
doesn't
the issue.
Stabilize.
Exactly. And we don't all have high cortisol, contrary to like what the wellness baddies on your TikTok are like making you think. Like not everybody has an influx of
No, that's true.
cortisol. So what if you have too high or too low cortisol levels? I feel like that is what's going on. And did you know there's medical terms for that?
Give him to me.
Addison's disease.
Give it to me, Rachel.
Give me to me, Rachel. So Addison's disease is the condition where your body doesn't make enough cortisol. So your blood cortisol levels are low. And you're going to get symptoms of low appetite, weight loss, fatigue, muscle weakness, low blood pressure, and dizziness.
Oh, that sounds awful.
Not feeling great.
But the weight loss I do love.
Emma.
Just kidding.
All right. And then too high of cortisol levels, that's Cushing's disease or Cushing's syndrome. And that's where your adrenals, like I just said, secrete too much cortisol. And that can cause fat to be stored in your abdomen and your muscles. And it's catabolic. So it breaks down your muscles and bones. And so you can have a wide face, purple stretch marks, puffy shoulders, and a buffalo
the hump on your neck.
Yeah, that's a huge sign of Cushing's. And also I want to give a disclaimer that this is not a diagnostic podcast.
True.
So if you have these, please go to your medical doctor and evaluate all these symptoms and get blood work done accordingly.
Yes.
This is just me talking into a mic in my guest bedroom. I don't want to get sued. And although some people believe that chronic stress may lead to Cushing's syndrome, there's actually no evidence to support that.
Really?
You can't get Cushing's syndrome from chronic stress.
You
can't get it.
Okay.
Like, oh, I caught Cushing syndrome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what that statement's saying. There's no evidence to support that. However, all right. So let's get into weight gain and stress, just to preface the next conversations. So it's pretty common people experience weight fluctuation when they're stressed. I know when PCS season is coming, and if you're not in the military world, that means permanent change of station. It means we're packing up our everything we own and moving to a completely different spot within 2 years. And so I know that's coming around because something's happening with my body.
Yeah.
I don't really track my weight, but I can tell something's going on because I notice different behavioral factors. I eat more or I eat less.
When I'm stressed, I crave sugar.
So,
yeah.
Stressed people, they do tend to eat more, but this could be just behavioral.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
weight gain from stress is definitely multifactorial: genetics, environment, social determinants, lifestyle.
Yeah.
We always want to acknowledge every single one of that. It is never one reason.
Yeah.
Almost always.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the hormonal reactions to stress, including that cortisol secretion, it can make you crave hyperpalatable food, which is going to be those quick carbs like sugar, like chips, like those foods. We all love to sit on the couch and eat. Yeah, those are called hyperpalatable foods.
Okay.
And it's thought in some way to quote unquote soothe some of that HPA axis that we were talking about, and it makes you it helps respond and it makes you feel calmer.
Like put you at ease kind of.
Yeah, that's the hypothesis.
Yeah. Well,
it's really cool, right?
That happens all the time, no matter what season I'm in. Just chocolate chip
cookies.
cookies
You may just like them.
always make me feel good. So
I think there's a link there, and I think it's really interesting. And when I read that, I was pretty pumped about it because I know people like reasons, and I feel like just even that as a hypothesis alone is comforting to some people.
No, that is.
All right, so let's talk about cortisol and belly fat. Have you heard like cortisol?
Yeah, belly.
It's described as the belly fat hormone, which is I don't love. Not my favorite, but having elevated cortisol can lead to a redistribution of fat into the abdominal region and around the organs. This is a biological evolutionary thing. That is because your cortisol again, is in charge of your fight or flight. So if your body's constantly in fight or flight mode, that cortisol is going to mobilize that fat from your cells just under the skin, so your subcutaneous fat, and it's going to put it in your midsection
to protect
your organs from the perceived threat. Your body does not know you're just working in the corporate world and you don't need that fat redistribution. But that's how
so
your body
cool,
responds.
Because like 2,000 years ago, when we used to be in the
wild,
you would need that, like your survival skills.
Isn't that so sweet of your body?
She's so sweet.
Thinking about you.
Well, no, guess what, body? It's just Karen from HR. So can you get rid of my cortisol belly, please?
But isn't that amazing? So unfortunately, though, in today's world, we don't necessarily really need to protect our organs.
Yeah.
I'm not one at risk for being mauled by a bear or getting stabbed. I mean, hey, anything happens. It's 2024. But I don't think I need to redistribute it around my abdomen for those reasons. Anyway, visceral fat is associated with more health risks than subcutaneous fat. So we want to avoid that fat redistribution. So not great. So although research has shown that overweight individuals seem predisposed or to higher elevated cortisol levels, results are inconclusive, and not everyone who is overweight or who has belly fat has elevated cortisol. Like I said earlier, everybody loves a reason why.
Yeah, that's so true.
And I think that's why the wellness baddies are like harping on this, because everybody wants a reason. That's my term.
We need merch on that.
Wellness baddie. TM.
No, you're right, though. To have like something to associate it with makes you feel better.
Exactly. And even people who are not overweight, they can have belly fat due to those cortisol levels. So it doesn't really, if you're one body frame versus another, it does not necessarily, you have higher cortisol levels like some people like to dictate on the internet. So just remember what I said, though. Elevated cortisol outside of Cushing's disease, anything that I'm saying is not regarding Cushing's disease nor Addison's disease. Elevated cortisol may not cause the weight gain. It can just cause the weight redistribution from subcutaneous to visceral fat. So it's important to mention that some individuals may be more susceptible to this effect. Have you been a victim of cortisol lowering supplements? Have you seen those on your FYP at all?
They weren't targeted as cortisol lowering.
Was it like just a wellness
branded? But I did.
Thing?
So like people say magnesium and L-glutamine. So I guess, yeah.
Okay, so those,
but I
don't hate those. They have other benefits.
Yeah, like L-glutamine helps with digestion.
Yeah.
So like,
yeah. So I'm talking about, I have seen some of them. They may not be as prevalent. I may have just been seeking them out, but there's some that are just being marketed as cortisol lowering supplements.
I've seen a bunch. No,
because that's a large claim. And there's a ton of them out there right now, but just don't.
No, they're everywhere.
Don't waste your money.
Like there's apple cider vinegar ones, which thank God you're my friend, and I know that an apple cider vinegar pellet is not going to bring down my
None of them have been proven to help to decrease those levels, and many of them only been studied in animals if they do have claims. There was a doctor, I'm going to butcher his name. It was Dr. Nadalski, and it says, some practitioners who prescribe these supplements claim to treat the root cause of elevated cortisol, but the stress, anxiety, and sleep apnea that cause the elevated cortisol are the root cause, and those are not going to be solved by the supplements.
Okay, Dr.
Nadalski.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, don't waste your money if someone's saying, "Oh, if you take this, it's going to lower your cortisol levels."
Because you need to address the root.
You need to address the root cause, because it's more than likely your environment or other things than whatever your body's going through.
That's so interesting.
Cortisol lowering diets.
I've seen that everywhere.
Yeah, that's a hot one.
And guess which one I've seen the most? Removing blank.
Carbs. I knew it. I knew it. You know what causes stress? Completely eliminating a macronutrient from your diet and not even being able to eat that. Yeah, that's going to cause stress. That's going to help your cortisol. Sorry. I just think it's so frustrating.
No, you're right.
So eating a balanced diet with like adequate protein, lots of plants, a lot of fiber, that's going to be your best That's going to be your best prescription for health for the general public. For the general public. But anyone who promises to balance your cortisol levels, that's just, they may as well be handing you a red flag on a golden plate, because that is a huge red flag. You cannot just eat this way and you will be fine.
Also, if you go as far as to like remove something from your diet without having confirmation by like getting your blood, what's that called?
Consult your blood draw.
Yeah, a blood draw, like testing those levels.
Consulting a medical professional.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to cause more stress on yourself.
Yeah. No.
And I know people are going to hate this, but like the best way to lower your cortisol, if you feel like you are suffering symptoms and you're like, hey, I do feel like I'm always in fight or flight. It's not a magic thing. It's implementing lifestyle changes. And that is, I know everybody's going to go, ugh, of course she's saying that. But it's like, are you on your phone right before bed?
No, literally.
Are you exercising, or are you over exercising? Like, there's so many different things. Meditation, yoga. Like, are you moving your body?
Do you get outside?
It's basic human, I was going to say wellness, but wellness baddies is
like what
a
your body
connotation. But yes, what your body needs, are you giving it that before you start to try implementing like this keto diet for cortisol levels?
Oh my gosh.
You know what I mean?
Not keto.
No,
Wait, I have also random side note question that kind of applies to this.
Yeah.
I always see that like having too much caffeine. Oh,
are you
is that
looking at my script right now?
Oh, is this our segue?
Yes, that was literally my next point. Yeah, it's coffee and cortisol. That's my next point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so
sorry if we just jumped ahead, but I see it everywhere.
Perfect. Yes, it is once again being hyperbolized by social media, of course. There is some stock in it. Like, okay, so many people say to avoid coffee. Like, if you're looking up something with the word cortisol in it, you're going to see a video of someone saying, absolutely avoid coffee. Avoid it. It's horrible. Honestly, unless you're drinking like 10 or 12 cups of coffee a day, like every single day, it's not going to impact that much. Like that 1 cup of coffee that you have in the morning for the general public, it's not going to impact.
Yeah.
I will say that one myth that I was surprised that's like actually kind of truth is to not drink coffee on an empty stomach.
So it is true.
It is true.
Because it's high in acidity and it's...
No, it has to do with the caffeine.
Oh.
Yeah.
I see that everywhere too.
It is acidic, but that's just for your teeth.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Enamel.
Never mind.
But so the caffeine stimulates your adrenal glands to produce more cortisol.
Oh.
And so the coffee on an empty stomach, because you have no other nutrients in your stomach to buffer that hormonal response, it's going to be a more exacerbated response.
Really?
Yeah. So it has nothing to do. It's
not going
to be detrimental. But
if you're looking for ways.
But if you are looking for a way to implement to lower
your stress.
Yeah. That is eat some before you have
honestly, like as I say this as I'm drinking a Celsius, thank God I just ate. But like when I drink a Celsius on zero food, I get the worst anxiety ever.
1,000%.
So that makes so much sense.
1,000%.
You need nutrients to help.
Yeah, you got to help buffer those hormonal responses, and that's gonna happen when you have food in your stomach. Okay, so should you drink 10 cups of coffee a day? Probably not.
No,
like that's never gonna be medically recommended.
That doesn't sound healthy.
I don't love that for a person. But if you're a regular consumer of small or moderate amounts of caffeine, staying within that 200 to 300 milligrams per day, if you're a healthy individual, continuing with that is not going to make a huge impact on your levels, because your body's going to be able to like, hey, I know what's going on. I'm used to this. But if you're jumping up to like 600, 700 milligrams of caffeine, yeah, it's not going to look great. You're not going to feel good.
That's going to send your body into...
Exactly.
Wait, I have a question.
What's up?
When you say coffee... Like, so you're talking about caffeine. So like matcha, is that a substitute or no? Because matcha has...
I think it's just caffeine in general.
Okay. That makes sense.
Just caffeine sources.
Yeah. Because caffeine's going to raise...
I just looked up coffee because you had asked me a few weeks ago, and I was like, oh, that's a good topic. Yeah. But if I were to make an assumption, it would be any caffeine.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It still is the thing that stimulates your adrenal glands to secrete cortisol.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wait, I love that. That's so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Which it's funny when you say it out loud. I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. But like, why would I drink coffee on an empty stomach? Obviously,
some people do, and if you're able to handle the jitters,
I was literally just gonna say coffee jitters.
Coffee jitters.
It's a thing though. Why is that? Why we should not normalize that? Should we?
No.
If you're jittering from something that's ingested,
you should take a stock in that and say, you know, maybe not.
Another question that I always have, because it's everywhere, and there's a ton of TikTok transformations of like, when I lowered my cortisol, my moon face went away, or my round face went away, or I'm not puffy in the face anymore, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts?
So the Cushing syndrome, a huge symptom is a wide face. And you don't really that doesn't really go away. That's just a symptom associated with your Cushing's disease. And it could go away once you get it under control. But people who are on TikTok saying, oh, I did this, I guess it could contribute to some puffiness, but if you're noticing an actual moon face or whatever, that would need to be medically checked out.
That makes sense.
Because you might, Cushing's disease is not something you want to mess around with.
Oh, and another one.
What?
But that makes sense too now. You kind of answered all my questions. They say like HIIT workouts can raise your cortisol, but that
so
makes
you don't
sense.
You don't want to
you're stressing your body out so much.
Yes, it is such a strenuous activity. That's why like you should not be doing hard workouts every single day. You need to have a variation in your types of exercise, or your body's going to respond like you are fighting in
like
the
holding
wilderness.
on to your. Oh my gosh!
I know, it's so
I
cool,
can
right?
see clearly now. That makes sense.
Yeah, so like cortisol's not good or bad. We need it for the homeostasis functions of our body.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. I feel like it's a trend that's just like going around, and it's fine if the core root of these trends is like people wanting to better practice wellness routines, and they're like, oh, I lowered my cortisol by not being on my phone before bed, or, doing different types of exercises. If you're doing it in the name of your cortisol, whatever, I don't care. You're treating your body well. That's fantastic.
Dry brushing. Basically, it's basically lymphatic drainage, and it's supposed to help your cortisol levels. Oh, shoot. We opened up a can of worms. You don't like lymphatic drainage?
It's fine. It's
wellness.
Functional medicine versus, evidence-based. But, I'm not one to yuck anybody's yum. If it makes you feel good and you see a difference,
that's true.
cool.
I don't do it. I just always see about it. Like how it helps get rid of cellulite.
No. I will say that right now. No, absolutely not. I put my foot down, Emma. If you want to do it because you feel better and feel less puffy, cool. No, it will not get rid of your cellulite. Cellulite is perfectly normal. Let's just put that on the books right now.
Yes, no, that's so true.
That has nothing to do with cortisol. That is just you are a human.
Yeah.
And it's fine.
Well, I liked this episode a lot.
It was a quicker episode. It's not going to be super long.
But that's okay.
But it's okay because I feel like when you had come to me asking about cortisol, a lot of the questions were answered once we dug into what the heck cortisol even is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you again, like I said, lowering elevated cortisol levels is not necessarily a bad nutrition trend that's going around right now. Do I think it needs to be taken to the fact of people being like, oh, if you eliminate, like you said, let's eliminate carbs and you'll lower your cortisol levels, you're going to have more stress from eliminating a major macronutrient than whatever said benefits are coming from it. If at the end of the day, someone's practicing better wellness habits in the name of this, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
That makes sense. So housekeeping is that cortisol is basically cortisol equals how much stress, like how much cortisol you have.
Cortisol is your stress hormone.
Okay.
But sometimes your body needs a little stress because it wakes you up during the day. Like that's why you have it a little bit elevated in the morning. It gets you going. So it's not a good or bad thing. It is just something necessary for your body. And just like anything, too little or too much is not fantastic.
Yay. But it was it's like you said. There's not much to it when you break it, the science down.
There's really not that much to. I mean, there is.
And it doesn't need to be so complicated.
It doesn't need to be
complicated because it is on the internet.
1000%. I was honestly intimidated. Like that's why I kind of put it off to episode 7, because I was like, ugh, I don't even want to touch this topic because it's such trending. But like I sat down and was like, all right, let's do this because it needs to be talked about. And it's really not that scary.
No,
it does need to be talked about. It is a thing. Some people have too much. Some people have too little. People living in stressful lives like definitely feel the effects of it. So let's talk about it. And I'm glad I did because it really was not that scary. If you all have any topics you want us to discuss, you can go to our Instagram, Dishin Nutrition Podcast, and you can click on a story highlight, and there is a link for you to submit it there, and we'll look at it going forward.
Yay! That was so fun.
That was fun. On that note,
you have been
dished. That was horrible.